What's up, everyone? Today I want to spend a few minutes talking about the Benchmade Bugout, specifically why it is such a popular knife and such a popular model with Benchmade. Not necessarily me making the case for why I think it should be so popular or shouldn't be popular, but just presenting some of the common criticisms and the common rebuttals to said criticisms and laying out a case for you as to what the general consensus is around the knife and what some people say and what others don't say. So it has become very popular as of late to trash Benchmade as a company, trash their knives, say their knives suck, say they're overpriced, say all these things. And I think there are some legitimate, valid criticisms of Benchmade as a brand. While I still think they make decent products, they are not without criticism. There are no companies without criticism. And I've put out videos talking about that and trying to be as unbiased as possible while still sharing both sides of the argument. So I'm going to try to do the same here with the Bugout and hopefully be a little bit more unbiased than the little talk that I gave about Benchmade and their company as a whole. So we'll start off with some of the common criticisms here with the Bugout. The first being it's overpriced. You cannot go onto a YouTube video talking about the Bugout without people talking about how it's insane that it is a plastic knife that is this particular model is $162. All the other plastic ones are $180. The aluminum ones are close to $300. G10 ones up there in the 250 plus range. So it's very, very difficult to find somebody who is not going to immediately just jump to the fact that it is a extremely overpriced knife. And while that may be somewhat true, there are plenty of knives that are overpriced, and we'll kind of rebut that and talk about that in a few minutes. I personally think it is a little bit overpriced. I think it's a lot of these companies are marking up their knives and really without an increase in quality. So I think that's a pretty valid criticism, but there are a lot of people who would just immediately, without a second thought, just jump onto it without being able to explain why it's overpriced. So I don't necessarily think it's wrong, but that is certainly the most common criticism of pretty much any Benchmade knife that you will find any information on. But as I mentioned, not without some truth to it. So the next big criticism of the Bugout is going to be the fact that it is just plastic. It is flimsy plastic scales with lots of flex in them, and you'll see that there are, because it's molded plastic, it's almost like milling for plastic, but not really, on the inside to reduce weight. And it is a very lightweight knife, but it also does feel somewhat like a toy because it's just it feels so flimsy in the hand. So the first time I ever went in to buy a Bugout, I was kind of set on it. I watched all these videos and looked at Benchmade for a while, and it's the nice knife brand in Cabela's, and it's the only really nice expensive knife brand that I've ever seen. And so the flagship model of that company I wanted to go buy. And I walked in, picked it up, and I was like, are you kidding me? This is insane. It feels like a toy. It literally feels like a toy. It's so light. It's flimsy. The plastic is just not that impressive when you pick it up. I mean, it is very lightweight, but is it really anything to write home about? I don't know. And a lot of people share that same sentiment, especially the first time that they ever pick it up. And that was my first impression of it. Now, obviously I have one, and so that did not entirely deter me from ultimately getting one a couple months later, but that was my first impression. I don't think it's invalid to say that yes, it is pretty flimsy, or at least it feels flimsy. It feels almost like a toy, and the plastic is just nothing to write home about. It also does have barrel spacers versus kind of a back spacer, a full-size back spacer, and that does not help with the flex in the scale. So you can see pretty apparent flex in the scales, which is yet another pretty big criticism of the Bugout. People think that knives should not flex when you're using them. The scale shouldn't bend or break in any which way, and that just means it's not a quality knife. It's just garbage because it's plastic. While that might not necessarily be true, that is something, again, that a lot of people say, and not without some truth, but again, there's more, I think, in my opinion, nuance to it than that we'll talk about in a few minutes with the rebuttals of these. Another thing that I've seen about the Bugout is the fact that it is somewhat outdated. It's becoming a little bit more outdated. It's just boring. It's a boring design. It's really nothing crazy to write home about. Yeah, it's a lightweight knife, but it's just a generic spear point blade. It's got S30V steel. It's plastic. There's really just nothing special about it. It just seems like any other standard boring pocket knife. And A lot of people don't like that. They want the super funky looking, I don't know, like MSI, Microtech MSI, or even the Osborne with a funky blade shape or whatever it may be. They think the Bugout has just got some boring and outdated designs. I've had some people comment that as well, just saying it's nothing special and, needs to be improved on, or they need to just ditch it and go with another model. So those are the big criticisms that I have seen and that I have heard and that I myself have had. And I don't think all of them are necessarily untrue. I mean, there is some truth to all of them, but we'll talk about some of the reasons that I would rebut and some of the other reasons that I think people would rebut those arguments. Starting with the price. I think, yes, it's overpriced. I don't think there is much of a rebuttal to that necessarily. Now, lots of other companies have been raising their prices recently, Spyderco being the big example of that. Whether that's justified or not, I don't know. Literally probably 10 minutes before I made this, I just watched a CBRX video about Bear & Sons, which is a family-owned business out of Alabama. And they are 100% American-made knives, which I didn't know. And the prices are a fraction of Benchmade's. And yes, they're using less premium materials. And yes, maybe the quality is not there. I don't know. I'm not really that familiar with the brand. But just the fact that this is made in the USA does not necessarily justify the price tag of it at $160+ for this knife. That being said, again, lots of other knives in the market are raising their prices. The Spyderco Para 3 lightweight, I think, is $150 right now, which is also plastic, and it is kind of a lesser steel. So same price range, you're getting up there in price. Everything is becoming more expensive nowadays, so that would be probably the rebuttal to people who would say that. There are not many people who will not acknowledge that Benchmade knives are overpriced, so that's kind of hard to come by. A lot of people will kind of concede, yeah, you know what, it is pretty expensive for a knife that maybe is not worth that much. Now, moving on to the plastic, one of the big things that I will hear about this and that I will see, and that probably is true, is that yes, it's designed to be an extremely efficient and lightweight knife. You have a very thin profile in the Bugout. You have a really, really, really lightweight. I think this is probably the lightest knife that I own, aside from maybe like a small slip joint or something. But it is a very well engineered and designed knife, in my opinion. I think, you're getting all of this stuff. You're getting a durable knife. You're getting a lightweight knife with great steel in just this compact package that, again, is just not going to take up much space in your pocket, not going to take up any space in the bag. So a lot of people will combat the plasticky feel of it by saying, yeah, it's designed to be lightweight. And both sides are kind of right. Two things can be true at once. It can be a flimsy kind of plasticky knife and also be designed to be lightweight. Now, does that, again, justify the price? Everybody comes back to the price with Benchmade. Probably not, but we're going to move on from that and just pretend that, price is not a factor anymore after we've already talked about it. The flex in the scales is another big thing that I see with a lot of polymer knives. And that's not necessarily unique to the Bugout, but the Bugout does typically get talked about a lot when talking about plastic knives, just because it's so popular and it's so apparent with the Bugout. The flex in the scales. That, a lot of people will say that's not necessarily a bad thing, because when you are using a knife, you'd rather have this flexible grivery or plastic versus maybe a cheaper plastic from another company that will just be brittle and snap when you're using it. So maybe there's some truth to that, maybe not, but that is something that I will present, and that's something that a lot of people will say, that it's important to not have, again, that brittle plastic that's just when you're prying or when you're turning the blade and doing all this stuff or whatever and grabbing down on it hard, that it's not going to just snap and crack. Now, you obviously can snap this plastic, but it's going to take a lot more than some of your cheaper plastics, if you can even call them that. By cheaper, I just mean less well-made plastics. So that would probably be the biggest rebuttal to that claim, if there is one. And I think the last thing that I talked about is the fact that it is outdated. Now, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I don't know if it's the most modern knife or modern design, but I think it is a very functional design. I think it's a very simple design, and I think it works very well for a lot of things. I prefer just a generic, boring spear point blade. Would I prefer probably a little bit longer of a handle and longer of a blade? Yes, but the design of it, I don't think is really something that is fairly criticized. I think it's pretty easy to say, you know what, no, I think this is a functional design. I think it works very well. I think it's very popular, obviously, which means that the design is not bad. So that would probably be the big thing that I would say to that. I don't know. I don't know if simple is or outdated is always bad. I think that simple is usually there for a reason. You look at the Buck 110, it's been extremely popular and not for no reason for many, many, many years. So if it works, it works. And that's just something that you should look at when you're looking at real popular knives like the Bugout that have been around for 10 plus years and been at the top of the market for that long. So all that being said, why is it so popular? And the big reason that I would probably give out of all those things that we just talked about, it's a good knife. It's nothing really crazy special. I mean, it's, in my opinion, I don't think it's like this crazy revelational knife that is amazing. But from what I have read and heard and what I have also seen over the past couple years, I wasn't really in the knife game when it came out 10 years ago. But from what I have read, it seems like Benchmade had a lot of influencers and stores really placing emphasis on this knife that was coming out and hyping it up a lot. And that drove the initial demand in the market. And it became this really popular, cool knife that was, again, the top of the market. And everybody wanted to get one. And there's some of that demand that is fueled by the just simply the popularity. People don't really care about the knife so much as they care about the fact that everybody's talking about it and everybody wants to get one. In my experience, this seems what I would say probably similar to the release of the MSI a couple years ago, which was probably 2 years ago at this point or so. The MSI, I think, is a great knife, and I think it's great that it's a Microtech that's cheap, but I don't think it's something that's like, oh my gosh, I have to buy a bunch of these, and they're sold out everywhere, and I'd say they're impossible to find because everybody wants one. That being said, I do like the MSI, but everybody was talking about the MSI. Blade HQ did like 5 videos on it. They gave it all the awards for the year. Knife Center, the other big YouTube channel, wouldn't stop talking about it. Like everybody was talking about the MSI. And from what I have seen, it seems like the Bugout was very similar to that 10 years ago. And that would explain, again, that initial demand and popularity of it. And over the years, my guess would be that Benchmade slowly released just more and more and more colors and variants and the carbon fiber and the aluminum. And now we're getting a bunch more just to keep it in the press, in the news, in the know, and keep everybody talking about it. Similar to what I have explained before in previous videos, where I think that Apple does the same thing, where they'll just release the same thing basically every year just to get people to buy it over and over again. And so while there is some element of, I would guess, business strategy there, where they're just trying to milk as much money as possible from the market by releasing the same thing but new over and over again, there also is the element of marketing that comes with that, where you're keeping it in the eyes of the people and keeping everybody talking about it, which obviously is illustrated by myself doing here. Even though I'm a schmuck I don't even want to call myself an influencer. A schmuck that makes YouTube videos, I'm talking about it. So lots of other people are talking about it. Every week it seems like there's a new color of the Bugout coming out. In my 2025 Benchmade catalog video, I noticed they are doing the fixed blade, the fixed Bugout. They're coming out with a bunch of different colors, which I don't even know how there are more colors at this point. They have the entire rainbow and then some, it seems like. But they're also doing some with aluminum. I'm sure they'll do some with micarta. So they're just going to keep pumping the Bugout out and people are going to keep buying it. And I think that is probably the biggest factor of demand. It's just that the social status of the Bugout and the fact that everybody's talking about it makes people want to buy it. I witnessed that firsthand again when I was looking for my first ever, expensive knife to buy. It's really hard to find stuff if you don't know what you're looking for. It's hard to find stuff other than the Bugout because everybody just points to the Bugout. So that would probably be the biggest reason that I give for why it's so popular. Now, whether you agree with any of the criticisms, any of the rebuttals, any of that at all, that's up to you. I will not tell you that it should be popular. I will not tell you that it should not be popular. I think it's a great knife. I don't know if it deserves all the hype that it's got, but that being said, I think it's still a decent product that you're not going to go wrong with if you buy one. It's just a little bit on the pricier side. So hopefully that's helpful to you if you are looking at buying a Bugout or you're not really familiar too much with the knife industry. There are lots of other options out there. Don't feel like you have to just buy the Bugout if you want a nice your first expensive knife. There are a million other options out there. I have a video on different knives that are comparable to the Bugout that are cheaper, some more expensive, but most of them, the vast majority, are much cheaper, and they're just a little bit different than the Bugout. So definitely go check that out. But hopefully, again, that helps. If you have any other thoughts on this, leave them in the comments. I'd love to hear what everybody thinks. I like just hearing what people think. I mean, there's always stuff that I didn't know about that might have happened a couple years ago in the whole knife world. There might be some other stuff about the Bugout that I'm not talking about and that I'm leaving out just unintentionally. So thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Make sure you go check out some of the other videos about the Bugout and Benchmade that I've talked about. And also in the description, I will leave some links for Hurricane Helene relief fundraisers that NC Blade and Hellacious are both doing. I think it's like $10 for both of them, and you enter in a giveaway to win some really nice knives, and they'll donate all the money to Hurricane Helene relief. So it's a nice thing. You're doing a good thing, and you're also getting entered for a chance to win a knife. So it's pretty cool. But again, thank you for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your day.